Good morning or good afternoon, depending on what part of the country you are joining us from. Welcome. We have a robust group joining us today, so we're going to give it just a couple more minutes for folks to enter the room, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right. Well, welcome and good morning or afternoon. I'm Elise Blazevich, the President and CEO of the Colorado Bioscience Association, and we are delighted to welcome you to this webinar in partnership with several other state affiliates from the Rocky Mountain region, AZ Bio, BioUtah, New Mexico Bio, and the Montana Bioscience Alliance. Many of us know the National Institutes of Health as a funding partner through programs like the Small Business Innovation Research or the Small Technology Transfer Research Program, but many of us don't realize the role that the NIH can also serve as a technology development and commercialization partner. So we're thrilled to bring you Dr. Micheal Salgaller, who leads the Technology Analysis and Marketing Unit within NIH's Technology Transfer Center. So we'll do a quick introduction of Micheal, but a couple of logistics before we introduce our distinguished speaker. The first is that we are recording the webinar today, and we will be sharing the webinar link with our state affiliate partners following the program today. Micheal will be doing a presentation followed by a moderated Q&A session at the end. So if you do have questions, please go ahead and put those questions in the chat, and we will tee those up at the end of the program for responses. So with that, Dr. Micheal Salgaller leverages over 20 years of business, scientific, and investment experience in various life science sectors to support technology development and commercialization. The Technology Analysis and Marketing Unit, where he serves, fosters licensing and collaborative activity between buy-side stakeholders and the National Cancer Institute, as well as the National Institutes of Health in general. Immediately prior, Micheal was a vice president with a healthcare-focused government affairs firm, where he led alliance development activities centered on civilian health. He spent several years on the investment team of an early-stage venture capital firm dedicated to life sciences. Micheal also began his career as a senior scientist at the NCI. He's the author of Biotechnology Entrepreneurship and teaches an entrepreneurship class at NIH. He also received his PhD in pathology from Ohio State University. So with that, Micheal, the floor is yours. Thanks so much for joining us today.
So thank you very much, Elise, and thanks to everybody who was part of organizing this. Yes, I'm Micheal Salgaller. As was described, I'm a recovering scientist. Spent 20 years on the buy side and then came back to NIH several years ago to head what is sort of like an alliance development team. And it was a very good intro because I'm going to talk to you today about opportunities with the NIH separate from the small business funding programs that we have, which are terrific, genuinely terrific programs. But certainly there's a lot more that you could be exploring with us. So again, thank you to Elise and the CBSA and the other organizations for being here today. As she mentioned, this is being recorded. In addition, I've provided the organizers with a PDF version. It's a little bit summarized version of this deck. It doesn't have quite all the slides, but most of the key points are there. And if you just reach out to them, they would be happy to provide you with that so you can listen a little bit more and not worry quite so much about taking notes. So why do business with us? Well, we have the largest annual budget for research in the world. It's a little over $41 billion. And we keep about 10% of that. 90% goes all around the world. And we keep about 10% of it in Bethesda, Maryland, and Baltimore, and the Rocky Mountain Lab in Montana, and a few other places, to fund our intramural research, our own faculty. As a former venture capitalist, I sort of consider that $3 billion on management fee. And so we use that to fund hundreds of different research programs. We're the largest biomedical research center in the world. Among the 18,000 staff are about 6,000 scientists, about 800 to 900 are tenured investigators. And with their efforts, they enter into, with both industry and academia, hundreds of licenses and partnerships each year. They do it in the entire product development continuum, from basic to translational, even into the clinic. And we need to work with you to get those important medical solutions to the patients who desperately need them. So when I first came back about 6 years ago, I was very delighted to see that economic development, facilitating economic development, is actually in the NIH mission statement. So we take the money that we receive from you, the US taxpayer, and we develop technology, some of which is protected through intellectual property prosecution. And the arrangements that we have are then used to obtain a return on public investment, so the public tax dollar. And that comes in the form of benefiting public health, as well as stimulating economic development. So part of our mission includes trying to help your company succeed so that they can get products to market. You can make money for you, your team, and your investors. You can hire more people. You can lease more space. You can pay more taxes, all that important economic development. So there's 6 opportunities for your business to work with us. I'm focusing on licensing of NIH technologies into your pipeline and doing a collaboration or partnership with our intramural program to move your product towards the market. So we do provide grants, and Elise was kind enough to mention that. We also offer a contract mechanism. So if you're more of a service business, we certainly do procure a lot of goods and services each year. We sometimes just buy stuff. And we also have other core facilities that if you're working with us, you can leverage. But I'm going to focus on the top 2 today. And when I came back to NIH after 20 years, I came back with some of the key myths about working with NIH that I heard when I was on the outside. And one is that we only do basic research. And while we are the largest basic biomedical research center, in fact, we do translational and clinical work as well. And we have translational and clinical assets. We don't just study basic biology and basic chemistry. We also work on devices, diagnostics, biomarkers, wearables, digital health, machine learning, etc. If I were to tell you that Apple and Google were working very closely with Stanford and Harvard, that wouldn't surprise you as much. If I told you they're also working very closely with us, you might say, I thought you guys just work on basic biology and chemistry and work with academia. So we do work in these more recent verticals as well. You actually can license technologies from us, either that we solely come up with or we've developed together. And you can negotiate that by talking to one of our tech transfer officers. We don't only work on ideas we come up with. And so that's actually one of the main reasons for speaking with you today. We work on hundreds of partnerships where the ideas actually originated in our company partners. We need your ideas. We are not permitted to start our own companies. We can't have an incubator. We can't have an accelerator. We can't have a seed fund. We are completely dependent upon the industry sector to get the technologies, to get those important medical solutions out of the laboratory. And so you can bring your ideas to us that you've developed as long as they address a significant unmet medical need. And although, the companies I'm talking to, I'm sure are located almost exclusively in the Rocky Mountain area and the Southwest, we do work internationally. So if any of you are sort of the US foothold of a foreign company, that doesn't matter to us. The requirement that you be in the US and you spend the money in the US is part of the regulations that go with the SBIR program. To collaborate with us and to license from us, you can be located anywhere in the world. So I'm going to show you a couple slides because, if you're familiar with anything regarding NIH and industry, chances are you're familiar with the SBIR program. So anything that we directly fund is part of the external or extramural research program. That's most of the budget. It leads to tens of thousands of awards, and an example of that are SBIRs. It funds hundreds of thousands of researchers around the world. And when they take that money and develop IP with that NIH award, their host institution, not NIH, owns that intellectual property. Now, again, a small part of the budget helps fund over 2,000 research projects held by over 8,000 scientists through collaborative research and licensing. And the work that we do on our own campus as part of the internal or intramural program, that IP is owned by NIH. Now, how does it work if we develop something together? I will get to that. So just to sort of spell things out pretty in a straightforward manner, the SBIR program is part of the external or extramural research program that provides direct funding. It is a competitive application process that has formal policies, regulations, and deadlines. There's an external review committee that suggests who should be funded and scores the proposal. And then a program officer helps determine the final list of awardees. And you have to be in the US less than 500 people. What I'm describing today is the internal or intramural program. Think of it as the faculty of whatever your local university is. We provide, and this is very important, we provide indirect or in-kind support. So we're spending money on your behalf. And I've got a couple examples of that, and I'll talk about a couple case studies. The funding range can be from tens of thousands of dollars to tens of millions of dollars. It's not competitive. It's not an application process. It's collaborating with us, again, just like you would with a thought leader at your regional or state university. Our investigators have almost total autonomy in what they work on. So although we're the largest, we're actually organized very horizontally. All of our 800 to 850 investigators, principal investigators, have almost an entirely their own choice in what they work with and what they work on. So they determine which companies they enter into collaborations with. And again, we can work with anybody in the world of any size. So we certainly come up with a lot of disruptive technologies that we hope you consider taking into your pipeline. Those don't have to be just therapeutics. As I indicated earlier, our verticals are many, and among them are tools and software. And those can be mostly preclinical. We do have a few clinical stage technologies, but most of what we have is preclinical. Now, about those tools, we have research tools available under a non-exclusive license. And I give example of that in my case study. And the good thing is those research tools are things like disease-specific mice and rats, antibodies, media, cell lines, etc. So one great feature is if you use any of our research tools to develop your own intellectual property. So let's say we send you a disease-specific mouse and you use that in-house at your company to develop new IP, your company owns the IP, not NIH. We also do a lot of these research tool work under a collaboration, and that's what I'll describe in a few minutes. So we have hundreds of products that we've helped bring to market. I'm just featuring a few here. Gardasil, really amazing if you think about it, the world's first preventative cancer vaccine. To think that somebody could vaccinate their preteen to, with a greater than 90% probability, reduce their probability of getting cervical cancer as an adult is truly amazing. We, of course, don't just do cancer. An example of another type of product is a reformulated version of ketamine. We have it reformulated, put it into a spray, and it was shown to produce significant antidepressive effects in test subjects and also significant remission in patients with depression. And it's also used for a number of mental health challenges. And we never know exactly what areas people might want to license our technologies into. So we actually also discovered, in an indirect way, squirrel-proof bird food. So our scientists discovered that the molecule caspacin, in addition to being possibly therapeutic, was detected by mammals as spicy and unpleasant, whereas birds did not possess those taste receptors. So a bird food company licensed capsaicin for use in bird food. So if you've bought squirrel-proof bird food or squirrel-proof bird suet, as I'm showing here, you're actually using an NIH invention. Now, we are the NIH Institutes of Health. We don't just do basic work. We look into the causes of disease, risks of those disease, how to prevent those disease, how to detect and diagnose it. Of course, we also study how to treat it. And we also do a lot of epidemiological work involving things like control of disease and survivorship. So this slide is one of those that you'll have in the deck should you request a copy. It shows the 27 different institutes under the National Institutes of Health, and those could be either based on a disease, like the National Cancer Institute, or a part of the body, like the National Eye Institute or the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. There are 20, there's 27 institutes and centers. There's actually 9 tech transfer offices. Why only 9? Because the smallest institutes out-license their tech transfer needs to the larger ones. So I'm in NCI, which is shown in orange, but my office has direct responsibility for other areas, such as aging, child health, minority health and health disparities, ophthalmic disorders, the clinical center, drug abuse, etc. Chances are some of you in the audience are developing technologies that are in the areas shown in white, such as infectious disease or metabolic disease, cardiovascular disease, etc. You can still reach out to my group. We follow that great slogan that a rising tide raises all boats. The institutes that are shown in white, unfortunately, they don't have what I call a business development team like NCI does. So therefore, if you reach out to us and you've got something in mental health, or you're developing a solution in neurologic disease or stroke, what we'll do is we will provide you contact information for which door you need to knock on so that you have a place to start. If your company covers one of the areas in orange or green, then our office would help you directly. So a little bit about those agreements. We have several different kinds. You don't need to know which one is best for your needs because our tech transfer officers and licensing specialists will help you with a needs assessment. Now, most of the time, these technologies and these agreements address some sort of scientific gap or knowledge gap that you need to overcome. If it's a license, it typically is pretty straightforward. It's there to enhance your pipeline. Now, under collaboration, a very common question is, okay, well, who does what and who pays for what? It is negotiated, and it is on a case-by-case basis. So I can't give you an overarching answer, but it's usually negotiated. And most often, Each side in a collaboration share the effort and share the cost. In a very general sense, the smaller the company, the less we will require you, or ask you, I should say, to help fund the collaboration. Importantly, for those companies that have a lot of resources, we're not a CRO and we don't do sponsored research. We do not take in money just to take in money. So what do I mean by that? Let's say you're a well-resourced company, you're ready to do a clinical study, and you have the study all done. You know exactly how you want the study run. You're just looking for a thought leader, a key opinion leader that you can give the money to and have them run the trial. And they'll be on the masthead of your study. We don't do that. We don't just do transactional work. In the example I just gave, there would need to be a discussion with the thought leader about what the clinical trial looks like. So that's what I mean when we're not a CRO and we don't do sponsored research. These next two slides I show you specifically about licensing will also be in the summary deck. So I'm going to first talk about licensing research tools or products. You won't get exclusivity, but you'll get a license so that you can use it for your purposes. The typical license that we do for commercialization is with smaller companies. So therefore, we try to downstream the cost. First, we just charge you pretty much what we pay. We're not trying to make money off of you. You've already paid for us through your taxes. So those tend to have lower upfront and higher royalties. Typically, then there isn't a reach through to new discoveries, and some examples are cell lines, antibodies, mice, and other types of reagents. If you're looking at it for just internal use, typical larger firms are interested in that. And those tend to be higher in total, but shorter upfront. And then there are the licenses for the therapies, the diagnostics, the vaccines. We do offer exclusivity if you need it for development. We'll provide those materials to you. In a typical licensing case is with larger pharmas and biotechs, more often than not. However, very important to note that we have statutory preference for smaller companies. So if you're interested in licensing something from us and there's some big fish, there's a Pfizer or Merck also working in that space. If Pfizer and your smaller company are both interested in the same licensed technology, you actually would have a better chance because we have statutory preference for working with small companies. Because we realize if you license something into your pipeline from NIH and you're a smaller company, you're going to give it a lot of love and attention. It's not going to be the 4th or 5th breast cancer drug in your pipeline. So now these, because they're meant for larger markets, will tend to have larger upfront fees. However, again, we will try to work with you to downstream these payments and make them manageable. If you're making the drug to sell in the US, so you want to go to clinical trial in the US and you want to have the US as your go-to-market strategy, then there is a requirement that you make the drug in the US. And then there's other requirements as well that the tech transfer officer will be happy to talk to you about. Now, as I indicated, we don't just work preclinically. We have the largest clinical investigation center in the world. Other places see more patients, other places have more beds. But all we do is first in human trials, and we do more than anybody. At any one time, we're actually running over 1,000 clinical trials. And we look at diseases of high public impact, and that can be things like diabetes, COVID, flu, cardiovascular disease, metabolic disease. So as far as the size of the patient population, as long as it's a disease of high public impact. That said, we are especially interested if your company is developing something that's in an indication that's orphan, rare, pediatric, or neglected. And we run those trials every day. We also do a lot of combination studies. We'd be happy to talk to you about that as well. Now, what's the advantage for your company? Let's say you're a service provider, maybe you're a CMO, maybe you're a law firm, maybe you're a consulting firm, and you've got a life science practice of clients. How can we help your company? How can we help your clients? Well, working with us, you get access to great scientific and regulatory expertise. The FDA is our sister agency. We can bring them in on certain projects as needed. Now, please note, this does not replace any of your own internal regulatory capabilities. This does not replace any of your company's formal interactions with the agency. But if we want to know whether a collaboration intended to do IND studies are really going to be IND enabling, we can bring the FDA in to weigh in on it. As I described, we've got unique reagents such as mice and resources. If you decide to just straight license something from us, one of our most compelling business terms is we take no equity. We can't have our director sit on your board. We don't take a piece of your company. As a former VC, I was used to having to give up 5 to 12% of our early stage company to get a license from a top tier institute. So 0% is certainly competitive. If you're collaborating and we need to ask you to put money into the collaboration beyond your internal costs, we have no overhead. So again, if you're working with the top tier research institutes, Karolinska, Stanford, et cetera, you'll be looking at 50 to 70% overhead rate on top of what they're asking for the project. And ours is 0. We're not trying to make profit off of you. We have milestone payments and royalties. Yes, they do tend to be lower than universities and research institutes. If you collaborate with us and we discover something new together, it would be jointly owned, but you would get right of first refusal to an exclusive license for that technology. And we can't create a new company ourselves and then license the technology to them. Now, certainly, there's a lot of advantages for us. We get access to your disruptive ideas. We need your commercial development expertise. Collaborations are one of the few ways we can bring in extra dollars. Again, keep in mind, 0% overhead. And most importantly, we get the satisfaction of seeing patients helped by your ideas. So everything I've described to date is not a special program like an SBIR. It's not competitive with application deadlines. It can provide indirect support. So how do you get started after this webinar? Send me an email. My email information will be on the last slide, and you'll also have it, or the organizers have it, and it's in the sample deck. We want to talk about your company, make sure that it's a strategic fit. When I say know your ask, that means, what do you want to do with us? Do you want to do a clinical trial? Do you want to do a proof of concept study? And then we try to get an internal champion interested in working with you. It's not that simple, but it is that straightforward. So now let me spend just a minute on what is a special program. It's called Startup 2.0. There was a 1.0 version. We changed it, and now it's 2.0. It's a commercial evaluation license, a try before you buy. You can get a 12 or a 24-month option to a technology, and you can evaluate it before you make a commitment to a full license. So all it costs is $5,000 up front. And if you want to get a second 12-month option period, it's another $5,000. So it's very, very affordable. Importantly, if there's any patent prosecution costs during the option period, we pay it. And at the end of the 12 or 24 months, you can convert it to a full exclusive license. So let me give you a couple quick case studies, and then we'll start to wrap up. This company, Rakuten Medical, started in the early 2010s, and they started with an SBIR. And then they went beyond that and they submitted a startup license application, which gave them an option to continue to work on the technology from Drs. Peter Choike and Hitsaka Kobayashi in the area of anti-cancer photoimmunotherapy. In 2013, they then exclusively licensed the technology that they collaborated on into their pipeline. So initially, they collaborated with us to do proof of concept studies. And those studies then finished off IND enabling in order to do a clinical trial submission. Based on that, in 2015, they began a phase 1 trial in head and neck. 5 years later, it was approved for use in Japan, and to date, they've raised over $500 million. And they started from an SBIR. So what did NIH contribute? Well, we helped support by providing indirect or in-kind support, as well as SBIR direct support. We provided scientific and technical and regulatory help, and the company eventually licensed their core technology from us. I said that we don't simply work on drugs, we also work on devices as well. Here's an example. Somnology, they had a wearable device for sleep disorders. We met their CEO at a conference and they were interested in getting clinical validation. They wanted to show that their device could work in a patient population. And so we hooked them up with a clinician from the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive Kidney Diseases. And once this study was finished and the company, their device did what they said it was going to do, this company that was developing devices for sleep disorders was able to garner enough funding to develop the next version of their device, which is called the Somna Ring. They started partnering with other federal agencies. NIH is just one of dozens of federal agencies doing healthcare. And they used the money to launch their own testing facility and commercialize their Somna Ring. And they've also won awards as well. So this slide on the y-axis shows the different types of diseases and disorders in order of the funding that they got from VCs. This is just in the US in 2021. So you see oncology, infectious disease, immunology, cardiovascular, et cetera. And now I'm going to show check marks in front of all the areas that we have technologies and programs in. And we cover the whole gamut. So chances are that one of our academic basic translational clinical research programs that we have ongoing are in areas that are of investment interest. So let me show you some examples of some value proposition. So at the top, just a snapshot of some of the companies that have licensed from us and had decent outcomes. Cargo is the most recent one. They actually, within a year, raised $200 million once they licensed the technology from us. Navigen, probably something a lot more in line with the audience. They licensed something, and within 2 years, they were able to raise almost $7 million in equity seed funding. And a much more mature company, but something I'm sure everybody aspires to who's on the call, is something like Recruit Medical that's gotten over, well over $500 million now. We also license out technologies that are acquisition targets. The best example recently was Kite, an immunotherapy company founded on our assets in the early 2010s, and in 2017 was acquired by Gilead for $11 billion. You can be very sure that their early investors and founders were very happy that they did not give up a single percentage of equity, because once you're talking about 10% of $11 billion, you could say now I'm talking about real money. Now, most of your companies are going to end up moving your products along and then have it in-licensed, a co-development deal with a large pharma for worldwide sales, distribution, and marketing. So these are some of the blockbuster products that started with smaller companies and then eventually went to the large pharmas for worldwide sales and distribution. So as we wrap up, one way to gauge how do I know if my company is ready to approach NIH about a partnership or a license? Again, please keep in mind that if the answer today is no, you can get back to us next week. You can get back to us next year. This isn't a grant. There's no clock. Come to us when it makes sense. So do you see us as a partner or customer? My office, Tech Transfer, we deal with NIH as a partner. If you're interested in selling NIH something, that would be a different door. Does your technology address an unmet medical need that needs approval? If you're working on a herbal medicine topical cream to help with dry skin, something that you'd get an infomercial and sell it directly to the consumer, or you get a website and sell it D2C, or you'd sell it over the counter. That's not our focus. It needs to be something that addresses a significant unmet medical need. Now, anything you do with us, we will admit, is a complex legal document. Do you have the time, the staff, and the resources to negotiate an agreement that can take months to work out? What's going to be very important to determine whether we can work with you is that, can you develop the resulting IP? I literally got off the phone an hour ago with a company from Spain that's raising their first equity round. They have 5 people. It's all encompassing to raise money. I've been there. So right now, they do not have the time and the staff to negotiate, execute, and conduct a collaboration. So they should wait. So make sure you have the people and staff to do the work. And you also need the internal resources, even if it's a cost-sharing relationship. So as we wrap up, here's our business model. I know it's a little unusual to refer to NIH as having a business model, but we do. We're funded by you, the US taxpayer. That funds our operations. We're not trying to see you as a revenue source to help fund those operations. So we can truly see you as a partner. And therefore, every collaboration we do is an exchange of ideas and effort. It is not simply transactional. Again, we don't do sponsored or fee-for-service research. We don't very respectfully work for free. If you're a company trying to get your first SBIR and you're having trouble, you've got 3 months burn rate till, keeping the doors open, we can't be much of a help. You do have to have at least some internal capabilities. Now, certainly, when we get products to market, we do get milestone payments, we do get royalties. Those are used to modestly reward the inventors. And it also goes into the money that we use to fund additional NIH research. And again, since most of the companies on this call are probably less than 500 people and privately held, we actually have a statutory preference to working with you. So as we conclude what I call the drop the mic moments, although we're thought of as an academic basic research center, if you added up all the product sales from technologies licensed from us last year, either co-developed with companies or created by NIH, it would come to over $8 billion. If you license from us, we take no equity. If you collaborate with us, we have no overhead. If you bring technology into the relationships, it stays yours. There's this march-in boogeyman that companies sometimes are needlessly worried that we're going to, for some reason, march in and take their technology. All I can tell you is we haven't done it in 50 years. And if we didn't do it a few years ago in the face of a global pandemic, we're not going to do it to you. You can validate your technology clinically or pre-clinically, and you get to work with world-renowned researchers and resources And we're fortunate. We're a well-known, well-respected brand, so to speak. And so you can increase the exposure and prestige of your company by working with us. So again, don't worry about scrambling about taking this all down. You can take a picture of it. I'm going to stop sharing in a moment. But again, this is in the deck. Also, the organizers have this. And with that, I want to leave time. Hopefully there's some questions. And I really thank everybody for their time and their interest.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. This has been really, really valuable. I hope all of our participants have learned something new today about partnership opportunities with NIH for technology development and commercialization. We do have a couple of questions in the chat. First, want to just remind everybody that we will share the slides as well as the link to the recording with all of our state affiliate partners who can distribute to their respective attendees. So keep your eyes out for that. Michael, the first question in the chat is, to clarify what types of technologies NIH will partner on. I know you had a slide toward the beginning of your presentation that this is not exclusive to drug development, that you will work in other areas of interest. This particular question was around development of instruments that are used in the field. So could you just remind our attendees about the scope of partnership opportunities?
Sure. So most of our internal programs center around therapeutics, diagnostics, and then a little bit less devices. As you get away from diagnostics and therapeutics, we just have fewer faculty studying that. We don't have that many biomedical engineers. We don't have that many software developers. So we do a lot in wearables, digital health, ML, that kind of stuff. In those cases, though, it's more often that the company will be bringing their technology to us, because those companies have great tech and they have a great business and technical team. But for example, if it's something for a mental health disorder, let's say developing an app to help teens that have suicidal tendencies. Usually companies that are good at building healthcare apps don't necessarily know a thought leader, a key opinion leader in that space, and that's where we can help. Again, we have lots of different programs in most major diseases and a whole bunch of rare, neglected, and orphan ones. So I would say to the company, just reach out. You can also look at, if you look at the website that I showed on the screen, IRP stands for Intramural Research Program, and irp.nih.gov, and that will give you an idea of everything we're working on.
Fantastic. Thank you. There were also a couple of questions that came in relative to IP ownership. And I know that you touched on this in a couple of places in your presentation, but of course, given the value of intellectual property to our companies, I know it's always an area of particular interest when forging a partnership. So would you be so kind as to just do a refreshment of how the IP ownership works if a company is working on a patent pending technology and comes to the NIH to partner?
Right. So the intellectual property the company brings with them that's assigned to the company would remain assigned to the company. If we're working on something new together and new intellectual property is created, then it would be jointly owned. And we in the company would determine who's going to oversee, who licenses it. When it's a collaboration, it's almost always the company, because the company gets a right of first refusal for an exclusive license to that jointly developed intellectual property. So in probably 99% of the cases, our company partner licenses that technology into their own pipeline. If you have, for the people on the call, if you have more granular IP questions, we have a lot of genuinely very smart patent attorneys here, and I can answer admittedly more 50,000-foot questions. If you have something more granular, I would be happy to talk to you and put you in touch with one of our licensing experts, because we want to make sure, and you want to make sure, that we're the right partner for you. We're not the right partner for everybody. And so if you have some concerns and we have some constraints that may make a university a better partner because they're not under the same government regulations, we'd be happy to determine that up front.
Fantastic, thank you. So the next question has to do with how the partnership around supporting FDA works. So to what degree would NIH partner with the company in approaching the FDA about a regulatory pathway or support them in their efforts to work with FDA? Or does working with the NIH create a more direct pathway to getting FDA approval?
It does not. It just, if we're, and again, this will be, I will admit up front, a 50,000-foot question. If you have something more granular, send it to me. I'll get it to somebody who can give you a more granular response. It's a matter that if we're doing a collaboration and we're spending taxpayer money to set up studies that we think can end up in a clinical trial, and especially if it's a new mechanism, it's a new molecule that's never been in people. So this is not for like a Me Too antibody, for example. So if it's something that the agency has never seen before, as they say, there's a saying that the pioneers get the arrows and the settlers get the land. So if you're the first in front of the FDA for an approach or technology or a molecule, it's going to be the hardest path through the process. So what we can do then is we can bring them in and they can help guide the process. But again, you will still need to have your, say, your pre-IND meeting with them, your end of phase 1 meeting, anything you might normally do. So they can be brought in as part of the planning process. And their advice would be just as suggestive as if you met with them directly. What I'm saying is the FDA is never going to tell you, no, you can't do that. But they will tell you whether or not your plans fit with what they think is a promising regulatory strategy, or if you might want to reconsider your approach.
Great. Well, it looks like that's all the questions we have for now. Oh, here comes another one. So this is a reminder, if you have any additional questions, go ahead and pop them in the chat. This question says, you mentioned that the program needs to be focused on unmet medical needs and lending to FDA approval. Does it have to be for human health, or could it start with animal health, but be foundational work for human health FDA approval?
Yeah, it needs to be for human as the primary go-to-market strategy. There are other federal labs that do work with animals, like the USDA and other places like that. So again, if you get in touch with me separately, we're actually one of dozens and dozens of healthcare agencies. So just like today, just like SBIR is just the tip of the iceberg with what NIH can do for you. Let's just zoom out a little bit. And NIH is just the tip of the iceberg to what's called the Federal Lab Consortium, which are hundreds of labs across the country in all different sectors, including healthcare. So example would be the Sandia Lab, Los Alamos, et cetera. And so some of those federal labs do animal healthcare and could work with you in an analogous fashion as NIH can do for people.
Great, fantastic. So Michael, you had mentioned that there's a database, so to speak, on the website where companies can look for what types of potential technologies are available for licensing and or to look at the different areas of partnership opportunities. For companies that are interested in pursuing work, what's the best first step? Is it to reach out to you directly or something else?
Well, I mean, everybody, you've now had this, been kind enough to spend your time with this webinar. So you have a lot of what we would cover in a typical lead call. So the last slide that I showed briefly has the link both to the entire NIH Amazon warehouse, as well as just NCI, which is my main focus. And it also has irp.nih.gov, which is your link to partnerships. So it's really up to the company whether you want to reach out to us or you want to just start shopping. And what I would ask though is, if you're looking for a license and you find a technology, each technology will have a tech transfer officer, licensing specialist. Different offices have different names for their staff, but they'll have the direct person to contact for that particular technology. And you can reach out to them and say, hey, I found this technology. I'd like to talk to you about licensing. If it's a collaboration and you look at the Intramural Research Program website, I can tell you that in addition to a description of their research programs, you will also find their complete contact information, including phone numbers. I would strongly recommend and ask that you not reach out to them directly. Our researchers, as I said, have a large amount of autonomy in what they work on. And as a result, some of them don't work with companies. They don't have to, because they're funded by the US government and the US taxpayer. So you might be reaching out to somebody who just wants to do their own work. You could also be reaching out to somebody who does work with companies, but their dance card is full. And so a lot of times when companies directly reach out, unless they have a prior relationship, they don't hear anything back. And so we would prefer that you go through the tech transfer office, because then we can make the introduction. We work with them on a daily basis, and they're just more comfortable hearing from a company that way. That also reminds me of something that I'm looking at the last slide and I forgot. If you're going to be at the Biotechnology Industry Organization meeting in a few weeks in Boston, we will be there as well. We're booth 3575. We'll be part of this larger umbrella called the Federal Lab Consortium. There will be other agencies there, and we would welcome you coming by and saying hi.
Great. Well, Michael, I think that wraps us up in terms of questions. Thank you again to all of our participants for attending today. Michael, thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise. It's great to learn more about the partnership opportunities here with NIH. As a reminder, we will circulate these slides with the links to the databases, as well as contact information and the link to the recording to our state affiliate partners. Thank you to AZ Bio, to BioUtah, New Mexico Bio, and Montana Bioscience Alliance for partnering with Colorado Bioscience Association on this event. And we wish you all a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.